everybody. Thank you so very much. It's wonderful to be here in the midst of folks who have such an incredible influence and impact on our country in such a critical time. My parents used to say to me that half of life is showing up. And I have found that to be true. It makes a difference when you show up. And I want to thank all of you for the ways in which you have been showing up and have been shaping the narrative and in your own way endeavoring to push our country forward. Not much, not anything really happens in our nation without young people. So thank you for your voice. And thank you for your creativity and your innovation and your engagement in the platforms and the places where you have influence. Give yourselves a round of applause. I know y'all holding those phones. But thank you all so very much. Listen, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We are living in tough times. These are difficult and dark days. And there are no easy answers. But I go often to a scripture that says that the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness overcometh it not. Whether you're a Christian, and I'm fine, God is known by many names, worshiped in many houses, and some are people of moral courage who claim no faith tradition at all. But I like that line because it acknowledges the darkness. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness overcometh it not. It is the recognition that these are difficult days. And I feel it, you feel it. Everywhere I go, I can't even walk through airports these days without folks pulling on me, saying, fight for us. And I am going to fight, and I am fighting for us. But let me say right at the outset something that all of you know. You can't outsource democracy. We all have to stand up in this moment, and we all have to fight for the America that we deserve and that our children deserve. And what we all know is that we can do better than this. And if we're honest, while all of us are rightly focused on this current political moment, which I have to tell you, this has been the longest 100 days of my life. But while all of us are focused on this moment, as I think I heard somebody say, it's been a long decade or so, or more. You want to come finish this speech? You know what I'm saying. But there is this sense in the country that something's not right. And if we're honest, it transcends Republican and Democratic administrations. You see it, the politicians try to capture it in polls like wrong track, right track. I think that captures some of it, but it misses the depth of what we're dealing with. But the fact that you see that wrong track number over and over again suggests that there's something deeper that we're dealing with, that I think perhaps the language of politics, even though I'm an elected official, the language of politics is too puny a vocabulary to capture. I call it soul weariness. You ever wake up in the morning and you just kind of generally feel bad, you can't quite put your finger on it, you just don't feel great, and then maybe after stumbling around you realize you got a low-grade fever. I think the whole country's got a low-grade fever. That we haven't taken stock of the trauma that we are witnessing and experiencing for good reason. We've been through COVID, and we're still dealing with a COVID world. Think about the fact that we lost 1 million people. Now, to put that in perspective, do you remember, are y'all old enough to remember how much 9/11 changed us? It changed the country. It was a shock to our self-understanding of who we are, the sense of invincibility that we had perhaps as Americans. Prior to that, the conscience of America was shocked by that. And we lost 4,000 people. The pandemic, we lost 1 million people. That's a lot of empty seats around kitchen tables all over America. And that came on the heels of 20 years of what felt like endless war. We've been drifting for a long time. Increasing wealth inequality and the sense of helplessness that a lot of Americans feel, that there is a growing chasm between what they want, basic Americans, ordinary people, growing chasm between what they want and what they're able to get out of their government. And so this sense of despair, and that is where autocrats and wannabe dictators and demagogues, they show up in those kinds of spaces. And they bring easy and simple answers to complex problems. They tell you that your neighbor is your problem. Well, if there's one thing that COVID taught us, it taught us, if we didn't already know, that our neighbor is not our problem. We were dealing with an airborne, deadly disease. If my neighbor got sick, because it's airborne, if my neighbor got sick, it meant that I was potentially imperiled. But that didn't make my neighbor my enemy. That simply means that I have an enlightened self-interest in making sure my neighbor is covered, literally covered, that she had a mask. And then when we got a vaccine, that he had access to a vaccine, that they were able to get the things that they needed. In other words, my neighbor's health care is good for my health. And somehow we need messengers in this moment who remind us that Dr. King was right. We're tied in a single garment of destiny, caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I'm saying we're all in this together. And so that's the work that I'm trying to do every single day as a legislator. It's the reason why I am fighting against this terrible bill that they're trying to push through Congress right now. It would cut health care for up to 37 million children, 9 million seniors, some $800 billion they want to cut from Medicaid. And I offered an amendment that said, when the dust is settled and the bill is passed, will we agree as a Congress that we will not leave people who are currently covered uncovered? Because they kept saying, no, we're not going to cut coverage. We're going after waste, fraud, and abuse. You heard that, right? Doge. I said, all right, fine. Let's just agree that we're not going to leave people uncovered. It was a very simple amendment, and all they had to do was vote yes. They voted no. And that tells you everything you need to know. The math ain't mathing, and they know it. They know there's not that much waste and fraud and abuse. They're going to leave people uncovered. They're going to leave children without health care. They're going to leave seniors without health care, feeling more and more vulnerable. And for what purpose? To give billionaires a tax cut. Meanwhile, adding $37 trillion to the national debt. I think we can do better than that. We got to be the light that shines where? In the darkness. The recognition that it is dark, but we have to push back, folks, and we have to push forward. I've been thinking about this. We got to push back. We got to resist the awfulness of this administration. We've got to resist this effort to run roughshod over our Constitution. A president who said he doesn't know if he's supposed to defend and protect the Constitution or not. He's taken that oath twice. He still doesn't know what he's supposed to do. And it shows. We got to push back against these awful notions that our neighbors are our enemies. Because when that happens, all of us become vulnerable. And it always starts with the people who are on the margins. Isn't that the history of our country? Isn't that world history? It always starts with the people who are on the margins. That's where it starts. It starts with sending a Kilmar Abrego Garcia to a gulag without due process. That's how it starts. It starts by snatching a young woman off of the street. Rumesa Ozturk, and she was, because you don't like her speech, without any due process. When I saw that as a father of an 8-year-old daughter, and as someone who was a student activist myself, I don't know about you, but it sent chills down my spine to see that young woman taken off the streets, disappeared. And what they're counting on is that you will look at that and say that has nothing to do with me, that's them. But if they can snatch this young woman off the street without due process, and if they can send a young man who has not been proven to be guilty to a gulag without due process, and if the president can simply sit there in the Oval Office and say, no, I can't do it because he doesn't want me to do it, and the other president says, I can't do it because he doesn't want me to do it, literally playing games with this man's life, if they can do that and then say, well, maybe we ought to send citizens, then all of us are imperiled. All of us. And so my message to all of us this morning is that we got to stand together. Martin Niemöller, who lived through the time of Hitler's Third Reich, said they first they came for the socialists, and I said, you know, I said nothing because I was not a socialist. They came, he said, for the trade unionists, and I didn't say anything because I was not a trade unionist. They came for the Jews, and I didn't speak because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me. And there was nobody left to speak. So thank you for using your platforms in the way that you use your platforms, because speech makes a difference. We got to do more than talk, but talking does make a difference. Showing up is important, and I know people feel soul weary, dragged down by a kind of low-grade fever. But get up in the morning and shake yourself and put your shoes on, as my dad used to tell me as a kid, and get dressed and get going. Put one foot in the other, and you're not always exactly sure the direction that you're going, but it's important for us to keep going. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and so I have the benefit. Atlanta in the house. And those of us who live in Atlanta, we're spoiled. Because, you know, we live in a place where we just walk around among civil rights giants. These are giants, and we act like it's just ordinary life. You know, the great late John Lewis was my parishioner. I was his pastor, but he was the mentor. Joseph Lowry, so many others, Mrs. Lowry. But Andy Young tells me a story that I've been thinking about often in these days. He said that after they passed the Civil Rights Law in 1964, Dr. King went to the White House. The staff went with him, and Dr. King said to President Johnson, Mr. President, we need a voting rights law. They had just passed the 1964 Civil Rights Law. He said, we need a voting rights law. And President Johnson said, I understand, I hear what you're saying, but I can't get that through right now. I just don't have the power. I used a lot of political capital pushing against the Dixiecrats to get Civil Rights Bill passed. Martin, I just don't have the power to do that right now. And they left the meeting, and the staff was feeling all demoralized and all dejected, and they said, what are we going to do? Dr. King, the president said he doesn't have the power. Dr. King took a moment, thought about it. He said, well, if the president doesn't have the power, I guess we're going to have to go back and get him some power. I love that story right now because as I move through airports, people are asking, what are you going to do? And I don't mind them asking that question. I signed up for this doggone job. I had 5 elections in Georgia in less than 2 years, and so clearly I want this job. But here is what that story shows, and here is what I know. Change doesn't happen from the top down. Change comes from the bottom up. I love it. Martin Luther King Jr., who was not an office holder. You're looking at him now because you're on the other side of history. You're like, he was larger than life. He was a citizen. Never elected to anything. Didn't command any armies, wasn't in control of anything, just a Baptist preacher. He said, if the most powerful man on the planet doesn't have any power, I guess I better go and get him some. And so what I'm saying to you is that you can't outsource democracy. That there's work that all of us have to do. We have to use the tools that we have in Congress. We have to hold this administration accountable, and I'm doing it every single day. But here's what we need you to do. We need you to create the context for the change that you want to see in the world. That's right. And I got a feeling you're ready to do it. Are y'all ready to do it? We got to stand up for this country. We can't give this country over to the oligarchs. We can't give this country over to the folk who don't believe in democracy. I believe in democracy. It is the political enactment of a spiritual idea that every one of us is a spark of the divine, that we have value, and if we have value, we ought to have a voice in the direction of the country and our destiny within it. And I know that even in these difficult days, a change is possible. I told you that I grew up in Savannah, Georgia. I'm the 11th of 12 children. My folks were ministers. They read the scripture, be fruitful and multiply. I went to Morehouse College on a full faith scholarship. I worked hard, grit, determination, but somebody gave me some Pell Grants and some low-interest student loans. I'm a Head Start alum. I'm an Upward Bound alum. All of that is federal policy. I know the difference that good federal policy makes. And so I'm not about to give this country over to folk who are just trying to enrich themselves. I know that we've got to give children a chance in every corner of our country, and I believe that we can do it because when I was born, and I still think that I'm not that old, but when I was born, think about it, folks, Georgia was represented by 2 senators. They were effective, but they were both arch segregationists. One of them said, we love the Negro in his place, and his place is at the back door. Well, I literally sit in his seat. Because change is always possible in America. And the other senator, my office for many years was in his building. And my staff had to work really hard. They had to drag me out of that building because they had a bigger office for me in the other building. But it was a reluctant move because I like being in that building. I like the irony that I was in the building named by this Georgia senator who was a segregationist. And his statue is in the rotunda of the building, the Russell building where my office was. And I like to go by that statue. Because every time I pass by that statue, every now and then I look back and wink at him. And so I'm just trying to tell y'all, we've had struggles before. We have faced bigots before. We've seen demagogues before. We've had tough times before. And somehow we've been able to pass by anyhow. So be that light that shines in the darkness. Stand up and use the power that you have. And when the folk in power become too impressed with the power that they have, remind them, as Dr. King and others did when they went to Selma, that power is not about the folks who are in the seats. Power rests with the people. And when the folks in power get too impressed with themselves, the people at the grassroots have to remind them that the purpose of power in the first place is to empower the people that you were sent there to represent, which I'm honored to do every single day. God bless all of you. Keep the faith. Keep looking up.